Welcome to the Black Male Impact. Today we have as guest Mr. Jasper Smith, aka Mr. Build Wealth, with us here on the Black Male Impact. As you know, our goal is to inspire positive change. And as you can see in the background of Mr. Smith, he talks about build wealth. And one of the topics that has been really been a focus within our community is to disrupt generational poverty. Mr. Smith, welcome to the Black Male Impact.
Hey, Dr. Cross, pleasure to be here. Really excited about this conversation we're going to have, and hopefully your listeners and viewers take something from it and run with it. Like I'll throw out a lot of gems, but let's take those gems and execute because we got a lot of work to do.
And I agree with you. But before we get into the questions, I'll just give you an opportunity to share more about yourself and anything that you want the listeners to know prior to us going into the conversation.
Well, for starters, I want people to know that Mr. Bill Wealth has pretty singular focus. It encompasses a lot, but the focus is really working to disrupt generational poverty. And it's for everyone. I know this is we're Black male specific here today, but it really is for everyone because I think, or actually, I know if we can disrupt generational poverty, then your kids can live a life of privilege. And so I don't say that lightly. And that's where I started opening up some different discussions when I say that, because you got to be intentional. Things will happen to you in life, but you have a lot of control, more than some may think. And I work with people to try to, I got to get it out of you. It's inside of all of us to be great. Like nobody dreams about being number two. Nobody dreams about losing. It's going to happen. It's life.
Yeah.
But what do you do after? What do you do when it's not going your way? Like, what do you do? You don't have a lot of positivity in your life. And so a lot of these things trickle over into our financial lives, our mental health, our physical health. So I'm just choosing to kind of stay in my lane. Like I'm impacted by all those things too, but I'm staying in my lane with the financial piece because I think if we got our financial status or situation a little bit more in order, or at least we're just comfortable with where we are, I think a lot of other problems and issues that plague our community, they either wouldn't exist or they wouldn't exist with such a, I'll say, negative magnitude. And so we can dive a little bit more into that a little bit later, but I'm trying to, change the way we think and feel about money. And if I can do one or both of those things, some magical things will happen in your life.
Man, I really appreciate that. And that's one of the focus within our communities, when it comes to us as Black people. That has been a focus for quite some time, but still haven't been real. There are changes. I wouldn't say there are no changes, but there are changes. But the more we talk about it, the more it becomes something conscious, the more we change some of the situations that we are in. And some we didn't really create it because we are dealing with somewhat a social construction. So we have to break those barriers. But despite whatever has been put in place, we can create change. So that leads me to this question. What is the mindset that it takes to make a positive impact?
You got to be a little crazy to do something magical in terms of making a positive impact. Like you got to be almost fanatical with what you believe. Like, and I hope that you believe something that's right and that's that's positive. But like you've got to believe in it enough to continue to go do the work. And some people they don't believe, and so therefore we don't look at like making a positive impact because we don't believe that as great as people are, you see a lot of talent and you're like, wow, they don't understand how great they are.
Yeah.
And just thinking positive and knowing that you know what you know and trying to actually share that and make an impact, yeah, that's not normal for everybody. So I do think sometimes we find ourselves like on these islands where we feel like, well, they're the only person, I'm the only person who thinks a certain way. Like I haven't found my tribe, I haven't found my community, I haven't found my village. And I think that lack of belief sometimes hurts us. But then if you flip that coin, when people believe and you know that what you're doing is making that positive impact, like it starts to grow. And it might not happen overnight, but when you start to believe, things happen.
And I really appreciate you sharing that, because especially when we start our journey, especially if you didn't start from a more favorable background, you may be wondering, man, can I do this? And a lot of people start and they stop, and sometimes they're maybe close to their breakthrough. So it's to have that belief, as you mentioned, within ourselves, despite what's happening. We can still show, we can still do what we say we're going to do and believe in what we believe. And it's a great reminder to the listeners what you share in regards to sometimes you may feel as if you're on an island by yourself. And that feeling can be discouraging. So I'm glad that you say to the listeners that you don't have to feel as if you're the only one. A lot of people have to go through the same process, but it's just a matter of believing in oneself, despite support, despite things happening when you want it to happen, and just to keep going until you start to see change or you start to see improvement. So I think that's a great reminder when it comes to making a positive impact, because it starts with you as an individual. So, man, I appreciate you sharing that, because a lot of times, man, the journey is going to get tough. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are, it can be challenging. So I asked that, which I may touch on it again. What challenges you had to deal with starting this journey when it comes to sharing, building wealth, and breaking generational poverty?
People don't believe sometimes that a young Black male knows his stuff.
Yeah.
To this day, I still fight it. Well, what does he know? Or we're not really sure. It's always like this skepticism. And I was like, well, if I was a little bit lighter, maybe some phone calls would have been returned, some emails would have been responded to. And I take those experiences and I just kind of file them away. So when you need that motivation, just think of all those no's, all the doors that get slammed, the unanswered phone calls, emails. I don't forget that I'm Black. I never forget that. And I have the same licenses as a lot of other financial practitioners, but there's still a majority of people who wouldn't look to me first for financial planning assistance, just because of how I look. I can have the same credentials, same licenses, designations. If I had, it doesn't matter, because sometimes it doesn't look. This doesn't look right, and so I use that as fuel. Like Dr. Cross, it's almost like just y'all gonna keep fueling me, because you think I can't do it. So thank you. I love those types of instances where I've got to keep proving myself. And I don't know if I'll ever get out of that mindset. And I think it's just because of where this country is in terms of wealth and who has it. And it's generally not people who look like you and me. We've got some wealth, but it's few, it pales in comparison to other groups in this country. I know they always talk about spending power. I ain't talking about that. I'm talking about like real wealth. Like we spend a lot, but not on investing, not on doing things that we should be doing with our money. And so I listen, I watch, and then I use that as fuel for the next effort that I do. If it's a speaking engagement, if it's interacting with the client, it forced me to get better with how I engage with my audience, whether it's online or in person. It makes you want to get better. So then when they say, oh, we didn't want to work with you, it must have been a really good reason, because I checked off all the boxes, did I not? And if you didn't see my face, would you know that I was Black?
And that can be a challenge for a lot of Black people, because they tend not to trust us as how they would trust other people. And to trust the other people, they may get the opportunity before we do get the opportunity. And sometimes the distrust is amongst ourselves. Our own sometimes don't trust us based on how we all are conditioned to see us. I saw a commercial recently, and in the commercial, they have two young Black males going to the store. They pause it, but it's still running, right? So it's for us, the viewers, to guess what's going to happen. Most people assume that they were going to rob the place just based on how they went in. And they were there, and the manager knows them because after a few seconds, you realize they and the manager start talking, and all they went there to do, purchase something and wait for their friend, because their friend works in the store. And I was like, even myself had that for a short moment. That's negative thought. But
Yeah.
it's just how we have been conditioned to see ourselves. And it's something that we have to work on, so we can break the barrier, so we can achieve more. Because if we're not able to trust each other, we're not going to be able to build wealth amongst each other. And, to really disrupt generational poverty, trust have to play a role in the process. And so I'm glad that you share the experience. Some people will tell you no just because of who you are. And it's just a reminder to all of us that on a journey, we have to realize that a no should not stop us, because our journey is different from most people, but innately we have what it takes to achieve success. So we just have to push a little bit harder than
We
most.
do. And what I would say to that too, Dr. Cross, is you're going to get tired. We're going to be tired. We're going to be weary, but what's it worth to you to keep fighting? Like, you can always give up. And I think for a lot of us, we've internalized all these feelings. And some of this stuff isn't stuff we've actually experienced. It's we've heard.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Cross told me about what happened to him. So now I've internalized that as my truth, and it's far from it.
Yeah.
So we haven't substantiated a lot of these things that we've come to know, but somebody told, we heard. I heard I can't do this. I heard you shouldn't do that. I heard. Who'd you hear from? Because if I haven't had that experience myself personally, then I need to go try and see if it's actually legit.
Yeah, and some things we don't have to experience ourselves. So, we learn from others and take the lessons, and just move forward. But at times, there are certain things that will test us on the journey. But just to know that we are going to pass that test, although it may be a little bit harder. But someone says what's in you and what's behind you are pale in comparison to what's in you. So we all have the strength to keep going. But I'm going to ask my next question, because we can continue on that topic in itself and how we are perceived in society, not just by others, but even by our own. But it's something that we have to work on and be really intentional, as you mentioned earlier, about whatever we working towards. My next question is, what advice do you have for the men listening on how they can play a role in creating positive change?
I like this one. So you have to be the example. And I mean, like, every day, like, be the example. I'm not looking for perfection, because you're going to have some bad days. But if you're going to make this change, show up every day. I don't feel great some days, but I go through it because I know I've got a bigger calling, a bigger mission. And for a lot of us, we don't have that mission, that goal, that vision. So I think we lack some of those things, which causes us not to act accordingly, if you will. But again, I don't want you to feel like you have to be perfect on this journey, because it's going to be twists and turns and obstacles, and you name it, you're probably going to experience it. But that's what makes the journey so fun, because then it gives you a story. Let me tell you about this time. And then you can just tell somebody, like, hey, you thought it was bad until I heard somebody else's story who was worse than mine. And I think it's the sharing, it's the leading by example, because I still believe in this theory that everybody can talk, but will you do the work? Will you take the proper action? And I mean all the time, Dr. Cross, not just some, like, you've got to be, even if you're not on your A game, can you act as if you're an A player that day?
Yeah.
And that takes a skill. But I think our society is always looking to see our downfall, and then we feed right into it and give it to them. And so they see us on that one bad day out of all the days in the year, it's the one bad incident, and that's how they remember you. And it's unfortunate, but you only have that one time to make a first impression.
Yeah.
And I always internalize that I got to put my best foot forward, and then I got to be able to live with those results.
Yeah.
I cannot control what other people will say or do, but I can control my actions. I can't control what happens when I step outside this door, but I know if I step out accordingly, I should expect the world or society to respond a certain way because they're seeing me all the time in this positive light. So you will hear probably next to nothing negative about me from anybody in my family, my friends. If I was running for president and this, if you run for public office, they find everything from like, well, you smack somebody in middle school. They're gonna interview that person on the news. Don't have those stories. You're gonna have some fun stuff, but you've got to always remember that somebody's watching you.
And man, you said that right. And it may seem simple, but when you have an idea of what you want, we all have stories, we all have things that we have done. But when you have an idea of what you want to do, the stories that comes to the surface shouldn't be things that's going to be detrimental. You see what I'm saying? Because
Yes.
as human beings, we growing up, as you said, you may hit somebody over the head when you're in middle school or high school, but it's not detrimental. But so being the example, I believe, is really important, as you mentioned, when it comes to the advice in creating change. And as you said, someone is always watching. So we have to know what we're doing and stick to the script per se. I'm going to do this. I'm not telling you that I'm going to do something and then I'm only telling you and not doing it. And that's one thing that we have to become cognizant of when we are thinking about change. There's something that I'll be sharing later, but I can share it right now, that society may see us as the problem, but we have to see ourselves as the solution. So seeing ourselves as the solution override the perception or the labels society may place on us. And that's where it comes to the point where we now decide to be the example for those who are watching, not just those who are coming behind us, but even some of our peers, some of the people who are in the same bracket as ourselves, and even ahead of us, because you can inspire someone who is much older, but is deciding to be the example. And I think that's a great way to create change when we're really thinking about it. Because what else? Whatever you're going to do, it's about being the example. And this next question, and you may answer part of it already, but I'm still going to ask it because you may have more that you want to share. How can we, as Black men, help to change the narrative? And you can focus on your specific area when it comes to changing the narrative.
So I think I think the first part of that question, it makes me think about the people you surround yourself with. So there's that saying that you are a summation of like your 5 closest friends. That checks out. Or the one where if you go 5 years from the day, like the friends you have, like the friends may change, but no, it's something about reading books. Like you read and start to level up as you gain more knowledge and access to the world. Like the way you think starts to also change. The things you consume start to change. And so it got me thinking about like the people in my circle, are they also changing along with you? And so if somebody isn't making additions to my efforts on the financial side or just in life, or they're not multiplying my efforts and supporting the Build Wealth movement and all that I do, I don't need you in my life. And I don't mean that harshly. I just think I can't handle you if you are subtracting from me or you're dividing my efforts by doing something that's detrimental to what I'm working on. So if you're not adding or multiplying my efforts, I'm either cutting you out of my life completely, and that's hard for a lot of people, or you got to really think about spending less time with these people. And newsflash, your listeners have probably already thought about this. A lot of times it's your family. And it's hard to say, how do I spend less time? Just do it. Or find a creative way to always have something else to do. But people who are negative, you begin to start thinking negative if you hang around negative people long enough. So you gotta make a decision, gentlemen. Look at wealthy people. Look who they hang around. Like I was listening to a podcast. The guy was like, "Do you ever see wealthy people hanging out in the hood? Like not the one they grew up in, but like, do you ever see them hanging out in areas where they didn't? It doesn't happen. They don't hang out in these areas unless they're doing volunteer work. So you're staying in your circle but that circle, it helps to almost protect you
Yeah.
because those people, you're on that same wavelength, and it's like, yo, Dr. Cross and I are on the same wavelength. We can hang out, we can rock out together. If we were not on the same wavelength, we wouldn't be here talking today.
That's
It
right.
doesn't happen. Like, you're not going to bring somebody on your platform for better who's a knucklehead. You're just not going to do it because that's a reflection of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not you per se saying it, but you allowing somebody to tarnish your brand or to be negative. It's unacceptable, and you're not going to allow that. And so I think about positivity, and are you multiplying my efforts?
Man, that's right. In regards to the people you hang around with, will influence you. And when you are about change, when you are about changing the narrative or making a difference or want to achieve more than the ordinary, you have to put yourself in environments or around people who will encourage you, who will even challenge you to do more, to be more, and to achieve more. And if you're not around those people, you may find yourself going backwards when your goal is to go forward. So I do understand what you're saying. And yes, that's one of the things that I was told when I just came here to the States. Maybe my first month, I was at a workshop on campus, and I believe the speaker came to speak to me. And he said to me, man, if I always say, he said to me, he said, man, if you are the smartest person in your group, you need to find another group. And if the people around you don't want to change and you are about change, then you may have to change the people around you. That took me a while to understand. Change, if the people around you are not changing, you change the people around you.
Yes.
And I was like, man, what's this guy talking about? But then after a while, I understand that you have to put yourself around people who will challenge you to be better or who want to be better, because the people around you don't have to be more successful than you, but they want the same thing that you want, not the same exact goal, but want to be better themselves. And if we're going to change the narrative, man, we have to realize how important it is to hold ourselves accountable and hold the people around us accountable. And that goes directly with what you said about the people that we surround ourselves with. As you said, the wealthy people not going to go on and just be hanging around others that don't really talk their language per se.
That's right.
They may be there volunteering or giving their time for a short time, but they're not going to spend extended amount of time outside of them working, of course. But it's important when we decide to change the narrative. We want to be around people that's going to encourage us, uplift us, and simultaneously challenge us. And I think that's a very important reminder. And I don't know how long you've been doing building wealth. However, my question to you is who or what inspired or influenced you to pursue the path that you're in? And sometimes it's not because of someone. Sometimes we see the condition and decide to do something. So who inspired or influenced you to pursue this journey?
So two, I'll say they're very close and near and dear to my heart are my dad and my brother. So I'm the youngest out of my parents' three children, but my father is a retired physician. My brother, he is a general contractor. We've all kind of taken that path of like entrepreneurship because my father was the example.
Okay.
And I didn't necessarily want to be in medicine. I didn't have the same interest in development and construction like my brother, but I was like, I liked how they move. I just got to pick a different industry. And my first job out of college was with a financial institution, and then the light bulb kind of clicked that I see where I can make my move. I can see where the change is needed, and I've been in financial services for almost 16 years now, and it was just seeing the landscape of my community. I'm talking to Black people. We just don't have a good relationship with money across the board. And I'm generalizing, but when you look at the wealth gap and the data and the research papers, we are always at the bottom of categories we shouldn't want to be, and always at the top of categories we shouldn't want to be.
Yes.
And so having seen all these reports over the years, I just said, I got to try. I've got to try to infect my people with this knowledge that has enriched a lot of other families in this country or in the world for that matter. And if I can infect them, then they can then go infect their family. That's how you disrupt generational poverty. It takes one. So any one of your listeners who just says, I'm going to be the change maker, just go full throttle. And I just kept watching over my time. I knew it wouldn't be easy. And so when I've had struggles in business, it's a quick phone call to my dad, a quick conversation with my brother. And I've grabbed some mentors along the way who are in my industry specific. But a lot of times those influences were just watching the landscape of where this country is and seeing what position can I play. I can't save us all. I can't tackle all the issues that plague our community, but getting that first job out of college and seeing that there just weren't enough of us in the office anywhere I went, I said, that's a problem. That's the problem I want to go solve. So that's what I've been working on. I haven't solved it. I don't think I'll ever completely solve the problem, but I'm making a dent.
Well, man, look, one person will not solve the problem, but you may say help 100 individuals, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then that 100, even if they just help one each,
Mm-hmm.
it multiplies. And say if each helps 100, and just imagine the numbers. So it is about doing the work that we feel that matters. And just by you getting the job in the financial institution out of college and see the situation that we are in and just making that decision to go and be of help to a community, that says a lot. Because you know what, man, I could stay in this job and work and get my money and then go home and live my life. But you decided, which is commendable, to go out there to help others to realize what you have realized that we can do to change not our communities, but our own lives and create something different for those who are coming behind us. So, man, that's really commendable. And one of the good things, as you said, you had example, your dad and your brother immediately to kind of give you inside knowledge and some of the things that you need to do to keep going. Because it can be challenging as what we talk about the trust piece, not trusting you as an individual or not being open to hearing about what it takes to build wealth. But from your experience, before we go to the next question, when you're talking to individuals about building wealth, what are some of their, what you'd say now,
like concerns,
fears? Yes.
Well, you've already said trust. That's usually number one. They have a lack of trust for our financial institutions for good reason, but that lack of trust is usually the biggest one. There's also that fear, I would say, is a close second, like that fear of like addressing that financial concern like head on.
Yeah.
We always want to go around and cut corners. No, just go right at it and it'll work itself out. Like something will shake out. So it is the trust factor, is the fear. Honestly, some people are just embarrassed. So I hold a certain position at a company. I earn a decent wage or even a good wage, but I don't feel like I deserve it. Like I don't know what I'm doing with all the money I'm earning. I don't understand my investments. And so they have this notion that I don't even want to tell anybody that I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm like a manager of 40 people or 50 people, or I have advanced degrees. And so society has said you've done a good job, but you don't feel like you're successful because you may not have much to show for all the quote unquote hard work.
Yeah.
Or I'm just going to avoid this until I have to deal with it. So it's that embarrassment, it's the fear, it's the trust factor. And I think once we can get past those things, my job is easy. I mean, Dr. Cross, honestly, when I ask people these questions in a meeting, the sales part of what I do is like 5%. Doing some paperwork, opening up accounts, that's the easy part. The hard part is trying to figure out what's going on upstairs.
Mine.
What's going on up here? And then once I address that, because we talked about earlier is how people think and feel. So then I got to think about those emotions because money's emotional.
Yeah.
But it's hard if you've never seen anybody be good with money in your family. So you don't have an understanding of what it means to be a good steward of your money. Literally you've never seen it. You see it on the internet, but you don't personally know somebody who has done well. So you tend to believe, well, I grew up in the same neighborhood, so I probably won't do well either. And that's how the cycle is perpetuated.
Man, you're right. Not seeing someone accumulating wealth or maintaining it can be a challenge. And yes, you're also correct. It can be embarrassing if, because you're talking to people about things that they think they should know, but don't know, but don't want anyone to know that they don't know.
Yep.
And
Yep.
to get people to understand that when you don't know something, the next best thing is to know it. And we all don't know everything. So we have to learn from someone who knows. And that's one thing that we have to overcome if we're going to tap into our own greatness and even break some cycles or disrupt this generational poverty. Start to change things for ourselves so we can change it for our next generation, those who are coming behind us. Because if we don't change it, if we don't start thinking differently, if we don't start operating differently, the next generation will have to start where we are. And our goal should be to move the needle forward to some extent so they don't have to start where we start. And that leads to this. What is your perspective on the current climate of Black men in society today?
It's not as positive as I would like, unfortunately. And I won't go into detail of all the law enforcement stuff we have to deal with on a weekly basis in our news cycle. But it's just we're not typically seeing it in a positive enough light.
Yeah.
A lot of positive stuff happens, but that's not what sells papers. That's not what gets the clicks. It's when I see these positive stories, and there are a lot of platforms that share positivity. It'll get minimal views, minimal likes, but again, I'll just if I go out here today and go slap somebody at a convenience store, that will make the news tonight.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
so yes, it's unfortunate, but it's like why don't we promote more positivity? And then from the Black man's perspective, it's just we don't get that respect. So they only see us in this negative light. So society continues to put us in this box. So for example, if I was out today with meetings, but I wasn't dressed like you, like I wasn't in a suit today or tie. So I'm gonna be perceived differently when I'm in a shirt and my book bag versus a suit with a fancier looking bag, just off looks alone.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that'll ever change, honestly. It'll take, I mean, I'll be long gone before we see some drastic changes, but I think we got to keep trying to fight to show the world that we are not a menace to society, that we are good fathers,
Oh yeah.
good husbands, good spouses, good significant others. There's a lot of domestic violence things that, again, you don't hear about the story about the guy who surprises his lady, his husband. I mean, you don't see the positive stories
No.
enough. So again, with so much negativity, the world doesn't believe. The world doesn't believe that I can be a faithful husband. Well, you're a good looking Black man. I know you're cheating on your wife. What? Why do you? What? I can't be faithful. Like
Yeah, because that's
the
how.
world wants me to slip up,
Yeah.
and it's the unfortunate part.
Yeah, it's like they have this negative expectation, and that's the category that we should be in. And sometimes I can tell you, even when I show up like this is how I am majority of the time, maybe 98% of the time, and which give a good feedback, and people will go above and beyond because it's like, oh, like they haven't seen Black men like this, which again shouldn't be the case. You should be in a t-shirt and should not be thought about as someone who is a menace to society, someone who is a criminal and stuff like that. But as you mentioned, man, where we are right now as a current climate, we still have a lot of work to do on our part. And we have to be the ones to take the lead on changing the narrative. Because if we don't paint the picture, They may
Yeah,
not paint a positive picture.
there
You
you
see what I'm
go.
saying? So we have to
Yeah.
paint the picture and understand where we are and that we are still perceived in a negative light, but decide that, man, we are going to be the solution to the problem that we didn't really create. We end up get caught up into doing some of the things that they told us that we're going to do, but we're living through a cycle that we didn't really create for ourselves.
Yeah.
Again, I would say from what I've read and what I've seen, it's a part of the social construction to see us in a negative light. And then if it's going to change, we have to take that responsibility if we're going to be that change. So with that, and I know you may touch on this that I'm about to ask you from the trust and what we need to do, but what change do you personally want to see in general when it comes to Black men?
I'll be very brief. We've got to work together. That's it. That's it. We don't need to, there's no long drawn out explanation. Just we got to work together and do it over and over. That's how we change this narrative. That's how we change the painting that, right? We've got to show that let's work. If we work together, that will change everything.
Man, I said that to a student today in the office, and the student would say, "Sir, but how are we going to get to that point? It starts with you. It starts with
Yep.
the person who is closest to you that you share the same values with. And you can start there. Someone is going to see you doing the work, and then they may follow suit. They may not join you, but they may realize that, you know what, I can work with the people that I know. So we can collaborate. But you're right. If we're going to change things, or the change that needs to be happening amongst us is to work together, is to uplift each other, is to cheer each other on instead of pulling each other down, because it seems as if we have been conditioned to be like a crab in the bucket, as they said. It's not happening amongst all of us, but it still happens where sometimes you're being pulled back by the people in the sense that maybe start talking negatively about you and stuff like that. So that's one thing that needs to happen, change in regards to how we work together, the collaboration piece as we go forward to make a change or a difference or an impact in our community. So my next question, go ahead.
Well, I want to add one more thing before we hop on to the next one. And I also think in working together, let's praise each other publicly. And if you need to criticize, please do it privately.
Yes.
That I'll leave it there. If we could just in front of everybody, let's praise them so much that the world begins to believe what we already know. We're great. We're talented. We can do a lot. But the world needs to see that, and we got to promote that by working together and promoting each other. But then if you have to have that courageous conversation, you don't need to do that in a public setting or on social media. You call that person, you go break bread, you go have a drink, you go have coffee. You do it in a private setting because that will show the person that you're not being malicious. You can go online and say anything you want right now, and the world will believe it. But if you have that private conversation, they'll respect that a lot more. And we need to do more of that public uplifting and the criticism, the courageous conversations. Do that stuff privately. Stop bashing each other in the public setting.
Man, I really appreciate that you point out, because we need to do more of that, because too many things are against us for us to add to it by criticizing or pulling each other down. But as you said, we can call the person that we see needs to maybe make some adjustments and say, man, you know what? These are the things that you can do. And when they're doing good, praise them publicly so the world can see. Because what we say about each other, that's what the world is going to believe.
Yes.
If it's positive, that's what the world is going to believe. If it's negative, because it's coming from us, then they say, "Oh, they're doing." We don't have to say that. They're saying it to about themselves. So that's who they are. So if we talk positively and praise each other, you're right. I believe that will help to move the needle quite a bit. Because again, the world is going to believe what we are saying about ourselves. Man, that's a great reminder, and I appreciate that point. What was a pivotal moment in your life?
Can I give you a couple?
Well, yeah, man, that's fine. That's fine. Just anything that will add value. So you can go ahead, man. Share a few.
So I have been fired from a couple of jobs or laid off, and they were all pivotal moments because I launched a new effort, be it a product, a service, as a result of this opportunity that I thought was great. When you lose that, it's like, what will I do if I had more time? And I just had something that I was like, got to bring that to market. So, a lot of people in light of layoffs happen with companies, it's just a business thing. But I looked at those as opportunities to what will I do next? Because now the ball is back. I'm now back in control of my destiny. So losing those opportunities, great moments in terms of how I think and move. And then the two that I'll say are more kind of personal are getting married and having a kid. If those two things don't change you as a man, then I don't know what you're doing here, because those two events had totally changed how I move. Because now it's what's best for me and my wife. And then when we decide to have a kid, and we'll probably do some more, what's now in the best interest of our family. And those two just really, I mean, unless something else, I mean, those are the big ones that really speak to moments in my life that really just changed the way I move.
Oh yeah, it's not about you anymore.
Yep.
That's the bottom line. You have to think with more be more responsible when those things happen. Married and have kids and stuff like that. It's now no longer about you. The decisions you make can now affect others. And as you mentioned, with the jobs that didn't go as planned, it gave you an opportunity. And sometimes we have these desires, things that we want to do, and we are thinking, man, how are we going to do it? But some of the unfortunate situations happen sometimes for us, not knowing it is happening for us, to really give birth to something that we always want to do.
It,
And
it,
so that's really a great reminder too to the
Yeah,
listener.
for some of your listeners, I mean, there is that fear of like going out and trying. And it's almost like you're at the ledge looking over, and then you losing that job is the push you needed to go do it. You weren't gonna jump over the ledge or into the deep end of the pool, but when that job got cut off, it was like, oh, there's the push that you needed. And a lot of times it is way more positive than negative, but though, I mean, for all of your listeners, anybody who's ever been laid off or fired from a job, hopefully you came back bigger and badder in the next endeavor, whether it's entrepreneurial, whether it was another job, whether it was a combination like that. If you needed the wake up call, you just got it. Now run with that. Please run with it. This is an incredible opportunity. It's unfortunate you're not working, but they just gave you free time to explore and figure out what's going to be the next chapter that I write in my book.
Man, that's great, because that's what happened to a lot of people at times. They needed that extra push because they would not do it themselves. And you have heard a lot of successful stories that says, I got on this path because this bad thing happened.
Yep.
But it's the greatest thing that have happened for me or to me.
Mm-hmm.
So you're
Mm-hmm.
right. Not everyone have the courage to just do it, but
Yeah.
in the end, it works out for a lot of people. So
Mm-hmm.
my next question to you is, what life lesson you learned late in life that you believe is important and that can benefit this current generation?
I'll say I'm still learning this, and I'm a work in progress. You got to ask for help from your elders. I swear to y'all, if you just listen, the people who really want to see you win in life, they're giving you the advice from the perspective of, we're going to help you avoid some things so you can get the stuff quicker, whether that's giving you more time back in your life, maybe getting to the bag or getting to the money quicker. It's just they're going to do things and say, I've already done it. There's no reason that you should repeat this process. I'm going to give you the game. And I think we've all got to do a better job of staying in touch with our elders and consistently asking them, like, hey, got this situation. What would you do? And a lot of them give valuable information that will just help you maneuver. You will dodge things that, had you not had the conversation, you would have ran right into the trap. And so I would encourage all of your listeners to really take advantage of the elders in your life because they do want to see you do well. They do have your best interests at heart. And so I'm reminded that sometimes when I'm in a pinch, I just reach out. Yeah, it could be my dad, it could be a mentor, it could be an auntie, an uncle, it could be anybody, just somebody who's got some years under their belt. They don't have to be in the same industry, but just somebody who knows you, has watched you, and then you can say, look, I got something on my mind. Their doors are always open, their phones are all they will answer your phone call, they will return that text message. But we've got to connect better with our elders because there's so much knowledge and wisdom that unfortunately when they physically leave this earth, it leaves with them. And so we don't document a lot of this stuff either. So if you're a second, third generation in the same industry, then you should probably know what your elders did because they're in the same industry. Because a lot of that stuff they experience is roughly probably the same. Aside from a few technological advances, I mean, certain businesses have not fundamentally changed in terms of how they work.
Yeah.
But if you have elders, it's just like getting relationship advice. Like I love talking to older couples who have been married for 56. How'd you make it work? I know y'all don't always get along, but they'll always share. We had, we valued the same things. We felt a certain way from a spiritual aspect. We valued family life. It's always like what they valued together. They might not like each other on certain days, but the love was always there. So I think a lot of us as Black men, we probably could stay in relationships longer if we were open to having that discussion around how do I make this work? If you want it to work. If you don't want it to work, that's fine. But the elders are just a repository of information that we don't tap into enough. And I still, myself included, I try to do more of it where it's like, hey, let's catch up.
You're right with asking for help. We also have been conditioned not to ask for help. Like help is a sign of weakness. But again, if we don't know something, and even if we think we know, there's nothing wrong with knowing what someone else knows. So we must be open to learning from others for one, but be willing to ask for help. And just like yourself, I'm not saying I'm the best today at asking for help, but I have come a long way. I remember years ago, man, I would be suffering in silence. But I've learned, especially when I get into education, and I'm now telling the students, so man, you need to ask for help, because that was one of my class where I'm talking about how you're going to be successful as a student. And I have to be telling them, but then I said, man, I'm telling these students every day to ask for help if you need it. So
let me say this too. Here's the magical thing about what you just said.
Yes.
When you become vulnerable and ask for help, help gets delivered to you.
That's right.
It might not be in that instant, but if you tell enough people you need help, help will show up. It's unbelievable how many people continue, especially Black men, continue to suffer in silence. Just open your mouth and tell somebody you need some help.
Oh yeah, man. I had to. I remember those moments, man. But after I get over it, and you're right, is to be vulnerable. Let other people know that you need support. And although we didn't really talk about like mental health, that's one of the things that prevent us from even getting help on the mental health piece. So I really appreciate that reminder about asking for help, because help can take us from where we are to where we want to go. Because to get to where we want to be, we may not know how to get there. So it's going to be the knowledge of someone else, and even just the support. And sometimes just ask for that support, and once we'll get it. As you mentioned, it comes from nowhere. Sometimes you'll be wondering, man, how do they know that I need help? But just being vulnerable and ask for it open a lot of doors to greater opportunities. But let me ask this before I ask my final two questions. I know we didn't go deep in building wealth, but for the listeners, we may have touched on a few things, but remind the listeners one thing where they need to start. Would you advise when it comes to building wealth?
The first thing I would recommend everybody to do, and I always say it's in my book, is when I do a talk, take inventory on where you are at right now. That's the step. Dr. Cross, I'm going to say it again. take inventory on where you are right now. Don't worry about where you're planning to go, what has happened in the past, just right now, today, or whenever you listen to this this episode, you just take inventory on where you are. Doing that makes the planning process so much easier. And I'm telling you this from experience. It's like going on vacation. Most people don't just go to the airport and buy a flight. They plan out where they're going to go, the clothes they're going to wear, the excursions they're going to go on once they get to said destination. So you plan and think through before you go on a vacation. Take that same energy and apply that to your financial situation. If you can just take inventory on what you have, you're doing what the majority of the world will not do. They just won't sit down and take inventory. It's the greatest place to start. Start where you are. But I need to know where you are, and you need to know where you are currently.
And thanks for sharing that. Awareness always give us a good foundation. So knowing where we are is really important. And when it comes to money and just building wealth, we need to know what we have and what we may need to make adjustments on so we can go forward. So I appreciate you sharing that. But before I ask my final question, I want you to share with the listeners, where can they find you and support the work that you're doing?
Yeah. So I'll drive them first to, there's a couple of websites I have right now because some people want to see like what I do as like a practitioner individually, but also still they're one and the same. But again, depending on what you're looking for, I want to give both resources. So one is mrbuildwealth.co, and that's just mrbuildwealth.co. Check that out. That'll give you a little more flavor about who I am, how I operate, and if you think I might be a good fit. That's one avenue. So again, that's Mr. and that's just mrbuildwealth.co.
Okay.
So no M on that end, just mrbuildwealth.co. And then the other site, it was the first one I actually set up, which is my company's namesake, thebuildwealthmovement.com. And so those sites will give you, again, just here's what I'm trying to do. I can offer a lot, but you might not need everything that I'm offering. I have a lot of blog articles that I've written so you can kind of see the type of advice that I'm giving. You can see how I work with people. If you need to get in touch, there are ways on those sites to get in touch depending on what you need. But again, that's thebuildwealthmovement.com and then also mrbuildwealth.co. You can find me there. If I can be of service, you let me know. If you just want to connect and see if I can be of service, I'm always willing to do that because it needs to be a good fit for both of us. And we'll know pretty quickly, can I help or if I can't? And I'll be totally honest with you. If I know I cannot help, you'll know that pretty quick.
Okay. All right. So what about the social medias?
Yeah, on the socials, I'm probably the heaviest on Instagram, and I'm on there. I am at Mr. _Build Wealth, and that underscore is critical. There's another Mr. Build Wealth. We're not the same ministry, but Mr. _Build Wealth is where you can find me on Instagram. And then actually, if you want to, connect on LinkedIn, I'm Jasper Smith. I think I put AKA Mr. Build Wealth in my so Jasper Smith or Mr. Build Wealth. You'll be able to find me on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn and Instagram are where I hang out the most. Okay. So if you just want to tap in on either one of those platforms, be more than happy to start a discussion.
Okay. Yeah, and I will put it somewhere in the description so
absolutely
they can reach out to you. My final question is, what impact do you want to have on the world?
When it's all said and done, I want somebody 50 years from now, or even 100, who remembers something that I did directly or indirectly that impacted their family on the financial planning front.
Oh man, that's good. Well, and I think you're already doing the work to make that happen, because the lives that you impact today will in turn impact their family life. And them having your book, your information, they will pass that information down to the next generation. So I can see that happening, where 100 years from now, your information, because you already created So the people that you work with and them having your book, it can then later become a gift to the next generation, just as how Think and Grow Rich have been passed down from generation to generation. Just once you do the work and you are doing the work, being intentional with helping us to learn more about how to build wealth and to disrupt generational poverty. Although maybe 100 years from now, the person that you help today, all their family will be wealthy, but they may pass it to their cousin.
That's right. That's right.
That's right. You know,
And Dr. That's exactly the mission. Is there are going to be so many people who benefit from my efforts that it's almost going to feel like, oh, he's been gone for 100 years, but we still have this connection. And it's just what you just described, where it's that connector that's he started something and everybody just kept doing it. Rinse and if it works and is beneficial for the family, why not rinse and repeat? Look at wealthy families in history. I don't care what culture you look at. It was somebody decided to make the change, and then everybody started subscribing to the playbook as they lived. They have made enhancements to the playbook. They may have said we're going to do things a little bit differently, but the playbook was there for them to follow. So you weren't out there alone. You knew you had a playbook. That's what I'm doing, and it's going to happen. And I can't wait. I'll be long gone. They'll still be saying that Jasper dude, that Mr. Bill Wealth, like, yeah, that was 100 years ago, and we're still eating good because of something we learned from that brother.
Man, that's good. And serving others, man, that's the best way to live. As one of my mentor told me, service is the rent we pay for our time on earth. So impacting others is what really lives on. So the lives that you impact, that's what's going to be the legacy, really, as we transition from here and what we do and stuff like that. So, but I will say, man, I want to really appreciate you, Mr. Build Wealth, Mr. Jasper Smith, for being here on the Black Male Impact, man. It's a pleasure getting the insights and perspective, because we all need it. We need a reminder, even just to talk about it, just to have that understanding. And I really, really appreciate where we need to take an inventory of where we are, if we really want to change anything in our lives, because we can't change what we don't know. So I really appreciate it, man. So thanks again for being here and the Black Male Impact.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cross. It's been my pleasure, and hopefully all your listeners enjoy this episode.
Man, I believe they will. There is something for someone listening. You may not need everything that was said, but there is something here for someone.